Start of narration. Hey everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Today, Ivy got a story that's going to make you think twice about your next hospital visit. This isn't one of those over-the-top tales you hear in movies. This happened to a real person, a nurse named Clara, and it's the kind of quiet, creeping dread that sticks with you long after you've heard it. So, turn down the lights, get comfortable, and let's dive into a shift that Clara will never forget. It all started on a Tuesday, a day just like any other at the old St. Jude's Hospital. Clara was a night nurse, a veteran of the graveyard shift on the long-term care ward. She was used to the hum of the ventilators, the soft beeps of the heart monitors, and the occasional late-night call bell. It was a rhythm she knew by heart. The ward itself was in the oldest wing of the hospital, a place where the floorboards had a tendency to creak and the lights would sometimes flicker for no reason. Most nurses chalked it up to old wiring, but a few whispered stories about the building's long history. That night, the ward was unusually calm. Clara had just finished her rounds, checking on her patients. Most were sleeping soundly. She settled back at the nurse's station, a small island of light in the dim hallway, ready to tackle a mountain of paperwork. The only sound was the low hum of the vending machine down the hall and the ticking of the large, old-fashioned clock on the wall. It was just after 2 a.m. The dead of night. That's when she heard it. A faint, rhythmic tapping. Tap, tap, tap. It seemed to be coming from the end of the hallway, near room 413. This was strange because room 413 was supposed to be empty. It had been unoccupied for weeks, ever since its last resident, an elderly man named Mr. Abernethy, had passed away. He was a quiet man who had spent his final days mostly staring out the window. Clara remembered him well. She got up from her desk, her curiosity mixed with a slight unease. As she walked down the hallway, the linoleum floor felt colder than usual under her soft-soled shoes. The tapping grew a little louder, a little more distinct. Tap, tap, tap. It wasn't aggressive, just persistent. When she reached the door to room 413, she paused, listening. The tapping stopped. Silence. She pushed the door open slowly. The room was dark, save for the pale moonlight filtering through the window, casting long shadows across the empty bed and the vacant nightstand. Everything was just as it should be. The bed was neatly made, the surfaces wiped clean. There was no one there. Shaking her head, she figured it was probably just the old building settling, or maybe a pipe in the wall. It happened. She closed the door and walked back to her station, dismissing it as a product of a tired mind. About an hour later, the tapping started again. Tap, tap, tap. This time, it was more insistent. It was definitely coming from room 413. Clara's heart began to beat a little faster. This was no longer just a random noise. She grabbed the master key from her desk and walked back down the hall, her steps more determined this time. She unlocked the door and flipped on the light switch. The room flooded with harsh, fluorescent light. Again, it was completely empty. But this time, something was different. On the window, the one Mr. Abernethy used to stare out of, there was a small, smudged handprint. It was on the inside of the glass, right at the spot where the tapping seemed to be coming from. A cold chill ran down Clara's spine. The cleaning crew was meticulous. That print hadn't been there earlier. She was sure of it. Feeling a growing sense of dread, she quickly wiped the print away with the sleeve of her scrubs, turned off the light, and locked the door behind her, making sure it was secure. Back at the nurse's station, she tried to focus on her charts, but her eyes kept darting toward the end of the dark hallway. The clock on the wall ticked on, each second stretching into an eternity. The rest of the hour passed in tense silence. Just as she was starting to convince herself she had imagined the whole thing, the call bell system lit up. It was the light for room 413. A cold, hard knot formed in her stomach. That was impossible. The call button in that room was disconnected when the room was decommissioned. There was no power running to it. She stared at the flashing light on the console, her mind racing. It couldn't be real. It had to be a system malfunction, a short circuit. She tried to reset the system from the main desk, but the light for 413 just kept blinking, a silent, persistent summons. Her training told her she had to answer every call, no matter what. Taking a deep breath to steady her nerves, she stood up and started the long walk back down the hall for the third time. As she got closer, she could hear a new sound. It wasn't tapping anymore. It was a voice. A faint, raspy whisper, so low she could barely make it out. It seemed to be coming from under the door of room 413. She leaned in, holding her breath, trying to decipher the words. It sounded like someone was struggling to breathe, whispering the same word over and over again. Cold is so cold. It was Mr. Abernathy's voice. She recognized it instantly. A wave of pure terror washed over her. Her hand trembled as she reached for the doorknob. She had to see what was on the other side, even though every instinct screamed at her to run. She turned the knob and pushed the door open. The room was freezing. An unnatural, bone-deep cold that had nothing to do with the hospital's air conditioning. The whispering stopped. And there, standing by the window, was a figure. It was tall and gaunt, silhouetted against the moonlight. It was wearing a hospital gown, the same kind Mr. Abernathy had worn. The figure slowly turned its head, and even in the dim light, Clara could see its face. The eyes were hollow, empty sockets, and its mouth was open in a silent scream. It was him. Clara didn't scream. She couldn't. The sound was trapped in her throat. She stumbled backward, tripping over her own feet and falling hard onto the hallway floor. She scrambled away, crab walking backward, her eyes locked on the dark doorway. The figure just stood there, watching her from the shadows of the room. She finally found her voice and let out a terrified cry, alerting the only other nurse on duty, a younger colleague named Sarah. Sarah came running, finding Clara pale and shaking on the floor, pointing a trembling finger toward room 413. When Sarah looked inside, she saw nothing. The room was empty, the air was still, and the temperature was normal. She helped Clara up, convinced she had fallen asleep and had a nightmare. But Clara knew what she had seen. The cold, the voice, the figure by the window, it was all real. For the rest of her shift, Clara stayed at the nurse's station with Sarah, refusing to go anywhere near that end of the hall. The call light for 413 never flashed again, and the tapping never returned. But the memory was seared into her mind. When the morning shift arrived, Clara recounted the night's events to her supervisor. While sympathetic, the supervisor suggested she was overworked and needed some rest. But as Clara was gathering her things to leave, one of the older maintenance workers overheard her story. He pulled her aside and spoke in a low voice. He told her that room 413 had a history. Long before it was part of the long-term care ward, that wing of the hospital was used for patients with severe hypothermia during a particularly brutal winter decades ago. Many didn't make it. He said that sometimes, on the coldest nights, staff would report strange occurrences, phantom cold spots, unexplained noises, and even sightings of a figure by the window in room 413, always complaining about the cold. Mr. Abernathy wasn't the first, and he probably wouldn't be the last. Clara transferred to the day shift the following week. She never worked another night in that wing of the hospital. To this day, she swears that what she saw was real. A lonely spirit, forever trapped in the cold, just looking for a little warmth. It makes you wonder how many other stories are hidden within the walls of old hospitals, waiting for the dead of night to be told. So, what do you guys think? Have you ever had a spooky experience in a hospital? Let me know your stories in the comments below. I'd love to read them. Thanks for watching, and if you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more scary stories. Stay safe out there, and I'll see you in the next video.